Everyone remembers where they were when they heard. August 5, 1962. Marilyn Monroe was dead. She was 36 years old. And from the very first moment, before the funeral, before the headlines, before the world had even finished crying, the story didn't add up. This is what the official record says. Marilyn Monroe died of acute barbiturate poisoning. Probable suicide. She was found in her bedroom at her home in Brentwood, Los Angeles, by her housekeeper Eunice Murray in the early hours of Sunday morning. Case closed. Except, it was never closed. Not really. Because here is what the official record doesn't tell you. It doesn't tell you why Eunice Murray, the housekeeper, changed her story. Not once. Not twice. 3 times. Over 3 decades, the details shifted, contradicted, collapsed. It doesn't tell you about the phone calls made from Marilyn's house that night. Calls that should have been logged. Calls that weren't. It doesn't tell you why the Los Angeles Police Department wasn't notified until nearly 5 in the morning, hours after her body was discovered. And it doesn't tell you what happened to the Red Diary. Let's go back to the beginning of that day. Saturday, August 4, 1962. Marilyn woke up at her home on 5th Helena Drive in Brentwood. A small, Spanish-style house, the first home she had ever bought entirely on her own. She had chosen it carefully. Deliberately. She said it made her feel, for the first time in her life, like she belonged somewhere. She was in a fragile state. She had been for weeks. The silence from the Kennedys had broken something in her. Friends who spoke to her that week said she was oscillating wildly, one moment furious, the next desperate, the next strangely calm. On that Saturday morning, she was calm. Her psychiatrist, Dr. Ralph Greenson, arrived at the house mid-morning. He stayed for hours, far longer than a routine visit. Neighbors later said they saw him arrive. They did not see him leave until late afternoon. What they discussed, no one knows. What we know is that when he left, Marilyn seemed, by several accounts, more settled than she had been in days. Eunice Murray, her housekeeper, was there that afternoon. She later said Marilyn seemed fine. Normal. Even peaceful. Peter Lawford called that evening. He later said that during their conversation, Marilyn's voice began to slur. That her words started to blur together. That she said something he could never quite remember clearly afterward, and then the line went quiet. He said he called back. No one answered. And here is where the story fractures. Because what happened next, in the hours between that phone call and the moment the police were finally notified, is a gap that has never been satisfactorily filled. Eunice Murray said she noticed a light under Marilyn's door sometime around midnight. She said she knocked. No answer. She said she went outside, looked through the window, and saw Marilyn lying motionless on the bed. She said she called Dr. Greenson. Dr. Greenson said he arrived, broke the window, and found her dead. He then called Marilyn's personal physician, Dr. Hyman Engelberg. Dr. Engelberg came, confirmed death, and then, they waited. For nearly 3 hours, 3 people stood in a room with the body of Marilyn Monroe, and did not call the police. When the LAPD finally arrived, at approximately 4:25 in the morning, they found something that immediately struck them as unusual. The scene was too clean. In cases of barbiturate overdose, the body reacts. There are physical signs, unmistakable, undeniable signs, that were absent from what the officers found. The glass of water that should have been there, to wash down that many pills, was not there. The pill bottle was empty. But the pills, at the dosage found in her system, would have taken time to consume. More time than the timeline allowed. And the phone records from that night, the records that would have shown every call made from her house in those final hours, were subpoenaed by investigators. And then they disappeared. 3 people were seen entering or leaving Marilyn Monroe's property that night who were never officially interviewed. One of them, multiple witnesses later claimed, was Robert Kennedy, the Attorney General of the United States, at the home of a woman who had threatened, in her darkest moments, to hold a press conference and tell the world everything she knew. Eunice Murray, the housekeeper, gave her final interview in 1985, more than 2 decades after Marilyn's death. She was in her 80s. She had spent 20 years telling one version of events. In that final interview, she paused. She looked away from the camera. And then she said, "Why, at my age, do I still have to keep this secret?" She didn't finish the sentence. The interviewer didn't push. And Eunice Murray died without saying what the secret was. The Los Angeles County District Attorney reopened the investigation in 1982. They reviewed thousands of pages of documents. They interviewed dozens of witnesses. Their conclusion? The original ruling stood. Probable suicide. But buried in the report, in a footnote most people never read, was an admission that evidence had been destroyed. That witnesses had been inconsistent. That the investigation conducted in 1962 had been, in the report's careful language, inadequate. Inadequate. That is the word they chose. For the death of the most famous woman in the world. The red diary was never found. The phone records were never recovered. The full FBI file on Marilyn Monroe, the file that J. Edgar Hoover personally maintained for years, was partially released under the Freedom of Information Act. Partially. Sections remain classified to this day. On a woman who has been dead for over 60 years. I am not here to tell you what happened that night. I don't know. No one does, or at least, no one who knows is talking. What I am here to tell you is this. The official story has holes in it large enough to drive a car through. The witnesses contradicted themselves. The evidence was incomplete. The powerful people connected to Marilyn Monroe in the final months of her life were never seriously investigated. And a woman who had spent her entire life being told she didn't matter, died in circumstances that the most powerful government in the world apparently couldn't be bothered to investigate properly. She deserved better. Norma Jeane deserved better. The girl from the orphanage, the one who stood in the yard and looked at her mother's window, she deserved someone to ask the right questions. She deserved someone to push. She deserved the truth. Marilyn Monroe died on a Saturday night. Alone. In the first home she ever truly owned. And 60 years later, we still don't know exactly what happened. Maybe we never will. But we owe it to her to keep asking. Subscribe. Because this story isn't over. Next week, Joe DiMaggio. The man who never stopped loving her. Who put roses on her grave every week for 20 years. And never explained why.